Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. What's going on? How are those students out there, masters of your own destiny? I hope you guys are doing fantastic. Thank you for being back here from Suarez Basement, a video podcast created especially for you, those students in the communication, media, and the art. And the good news is that now we have alumni and we have professionals in the field being part of our family, following us, watching our videos. So that is very exciting news because in the end, this is a video podcast that is created with a lot of love and a lot of effort to be sure that we can keep you entertained, educated, and informed in the field of communication, media, and the arts. Okay, so before we start our conversation of today, which is about technology and social interaction, I want to take the opportunity very quick. I know students, you don't like to be told what to do, but please, it's just a suggestion, a very strong suggestion. If you have not registered yet to vote, just please go to usa.gov and be sure that you register to vote. Your vote in November is extremely important. I don't care who are you going to vote for, as long you vote. So if you already registered, just please help other ones to do it, so to be sure that we all go together in November and we can cast our ballots and we can make this democracy stronger. Because believe it or not, democracy is based in your vote. So just go and register. That's very important. Who is our guest today? A good colleague of mine, a good friend of mine, Professor Ulises Mejias is here to talk about technology and social interaction, especially in these days where we basically interact through technology with everybody, right? So it's important to have this conversation. I think it's going to be extremely interesting. And our co-host is also a very good friend of mine and a colleague of mine from the Communication Studies Department at SUNY Oswego. Serenity Sutherland is here to also co-host this video podcast. So again, thank you for being here. I appreciate the company, and I will see you next week for a new video podcast here from Suarez Basement. Let's start right away. Here we go. It's a pleasure to have you here from Suarez Basement, especially to talk to our students about a subject I think it is very important to be talking in these crazy days that we're living in. So we're going to welcome Ulises and Serenity. You can introduce yourself. Ulises is going to start with you, and then we go with Serenity, so our students or other students that are watching know who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Ulises Mejias, and I am an associate professor in the same department where Professor Suarez and Professor Sutherland are working, the Communication Studies Department and the Broadcasting major. So I've been at Oswego, something like 12 or 13 years. I've lost count.
Tell me a little bit, Ulises, what exactly that you teach? What is your yeah?
Yeah, well, so I actually teach some courses in the broadcasting major as well as the graduate studies program. So I teach a course on social networks and the web. I teach a course on technology and culture that Serenity also teaches sometimes. And then some integrated media project courses, things like that.
Hi everyone, I'm Serenity Sutherland. I'm in the Communication Studies program as well. And the types of courses I teach relate to integrated media. I also teach technology and culture, as Ulises mentioned. I teach in the undergrad and the graduate program. And I've taught some classes on science and communication, as well as national parks and media. So I like to do some special topics courses as well. And I love being a professor, and I'm so glad that Francisco is doing this because it's an awesome way to connect with all of you at a time when we're separate. So I'm excited.
So my first question to you, Ulises, is, are these crises that we're living in, the coronavirus crisis, and the fact that we are using technology in order to keep in touch with our loved ones, with work, with everything out there, right? We live in this little bubble in our house, but technology is allowing us to keep this contact. Do you think this crisis of the coronavirus is going to change the way we communicate in the future, from the way we work to the way we interact with other people?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question, Francisco. And, I guess I should start by saying that all technologies change the way we communicate. So you might have heard this very famous saying by Canadian professor Marshall McLuhan, and he said the medium is the message, which basically means that every technology is unique and every technology shapes the way we communicate or interact. And I think we can see that very clearly in today's crises. Now, thank God that we have these technologies so that even during social distancing and social isolation, we can keep communicating, we can keep talking to each other. But I guess what I'm interested in is the fact that these technologies are not neutral. So it's not just that they mediate the communication between us like it's doing right now. They also change the way we communicate. They force us, if you will, to do certain things differently. So they prescribe behaviors to us. Now, one very interesting statistic I was reading about is that since the COVID-19 crisis started, as we can expect, the use of certain websites is going up dramatically. So for instance, Facebook, since the first death in the United States due to COVID-19, Facebook has gone up 27% in terms of use. Netflix has gone up 16%. YouTube has gone up 15.3%. We know, for instance, Zoom, which we're using right now, has also increased exponentially the use of it. So all of this to say that we're shifting the way we communicate. We're shifting our use of these websites and what we use them for, how frequently we use them. So yes, telepresence has many benefits. And like I said earlier, we're fortunate that we have these technologies to facilitate our communication. But at the same time, we should not be blind to its social effects as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a great point, and it made me think about a question that I often grapple with as a teacher of technology is sometimes students, and not just students, but people all throughout the world, come to the idea of technology with this perception that it's just some good. All it is a good. Technology is always good. But in fact, we see lots of types of technologies, and you mentioned some really good ones that actually have negative ramifications. And so how in your teaching, Ulises, do you help students understand technology isn't just a good? Because this seems like a very hard thing to unlearn, right? To see that technology is helpful, yes, but it can also be harmful. So what kind of techniques or what kind of stories do you like to tell to your students to help them see that technology is both a good and a bad? It's kind of like a mixed bag.
Yes, well, Serenity, you and I teach that course, Technology and Culture, and so I'm sure we encounter many of the same challenges. In a positive way. I think, it's one of my favorite courses to teach. And so I enjoy very much going through these challenges with the students. But one of the things I tell them right at the beginning is, hopefully you will graduate from this course never again saying technology is neutral, because technology is not neutral. Yes, technology can be applied in this way or that way, but that doesn't make it neutral. The reason why it's designed, the way in which it's produced, the way in which it is used, those are all political things, they impact our society in different ways. So I think it's very easy also to think about technology as an isolated object. So, it's like, oh, here's my phone, and it's just a discrete technology. There it is. I can look at it, I can hold it. But what I try to do in that course is basically, analyze with students the whole set of relationships surrounding that isolated object. Where was it made? What natural resources go into its making? For instance, some of my students are surprised to learn that all of our electronic devices are made with minerals that many times come from countries in the global south, where those minerals are extracted under very dangerous conditions, exploitative conditions even. And then our devices are assembled in some factory in China, also sometimes under conditions that are not very beneficial, for the workers assembling that. All of those relationships are kind of lost, and they're kind of invisible when we just think of technology as an isolated object. So, the first and the most important thing I try to help my students realize is that, yes, technology is not neutral and technology is not an isolated object. We have to think of all of these relationships that are hidden, that are invisible, in order to be critical about it. And again, this COVID-19 crisis is another great example, right? Because, for instance, you might have heard there's a lot of talk about contact tracing apps. So this is an app you would install in your phone. And so it sounds great. It will give you an alert, send you an alert. It's like, well, it looks like, unfortunately, you were close to someone who later tested positive for the COVID-19 virus. Sounds like something useful. Sounds like something that might have a positive impact on the crisis. But we also have to think about all of the data that's being collected, all of our personal information that might be collected in the process. Some of it might be anonymous, some of it might be, data that doesn't have a lot of consequences, but some of it might be sensitive data. So those are the kinds of things we have to think about.
I'm going to play the role of a student. The student feel technology is something that they use basically in their everyday life, and they see it always as a positive thing. However, we're talking about, no, it's not that positive how you think. One of the answers would be, well, it's my own choice. If you don't like it and you feel like Facebook and Google and all these companies are getting too much power and too much data about me, it's my own decision. How dangerous, and also in a time where the coronavirus is giving more power to these companies. They were already in power of so much data, but now it's like totally out of proportion. When a student say, well, it's my own choice, how dangerous is that data and how these companies use this data?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent point, Francisco, because I think that's a position I usually encounter with my students at the beginning of the semester. When I start to talk about, well, all of this data is being collected, are you concerned? And the first response, which is, I think, justifiable, is, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. Why would I mind if that data is being collected? And if it's being collected to catch the people who are doing something wrong, then, maybe that's a good thing. And so then we have a conversation about that, about the fact that, well, it's true, but who defines what is wrong? And right now we have certain people in power who very quickly might decide, after 9/11, Muslims were suddenly all suspects. Today, maybe it's migrants. Maybe it's people from ethnic minorities. Maybe it's people who don't identify with mainstream gender constructs. So very quickly, you can use these tools that are already in place because nobody said anything about, well, wait a minute, yes, I'm not doing anything wrong, but maybe I should care about how this could potentially be used. So the infrastructure is in place, and then the definition of who is a suspect can very easily change. But you're right, because I think we are used to thinking of data as raw. I think we have all heard that expression. It's just raw data. It doesn't have any meaning in and of itself. But some people argue there is no such thing as raw data. From the beginning, if your intention is to collect it for a particular purpose, then it's no longer neutral, it's no longer raw. And I think what we're seeing is that corporations have very specific intentions when they collect the data. Governments have very specific intentions when they collect that data. Those intentions can change historically, politically, depending on who's in power. I think we've all also heard recently that laws are being passed that the FBI can access our browsing history without a warrant. It's like the FBI can select any citizen or any person living in the United States and look at their browsing history. Are we okay with that? Is that just raw data? Does it mean if I'm not doing anything wrong, am I comfortable with my data, with my browsing history being collected that way?